underneath the doghouse, you see that little sort of, well, there's a little motor next to a sensor next to a large gear. The reason it can move those very large locomotives is because of those gear ratios. It reduces its speed because you're dealing with a small gear going to a large gear. But when you do that, you increase the torque, which increases the ability for that work to be turned into rotational energy, but you have to give up your speed for it. So, you would follow me in.
I just joined the tour.
No worries, brother.
Well, that was pretty something, you know? And I always like it coming back in here.
So, this right here is we're inside the roundhouse, and right behind me is the inspection pit. If you want to walk up, feel free. This is where our Baldwin 26 comes in. Whenever it's turned on that turntable, whenever it's brought out, it's typically kept in this bay. The point of this inspection pit is, as you can guess, to inspect the locomotive. Guys, there's room. You can walk up. It's fine. Back when this was run by the railroad, whenever the locomotives be brought in here, be swarmed by a crew of between 5 and 10 men. So I typically say on average 7. They would check every single part to make sure everything was good and functioning. They would swarm it with ball peen hammers. Any guesses as to why? No bad answers. So, they would hit them to see how the metal would ring. If you hit metal on metal and there's no damage in the metal, it's going to ring true, picture like a bell. But if you hit it and there's sort of a dull thud, that means there's some sort of crack or fracture within that metal. So they do that with all these different moving parts, like the drive rods, the linkage rods, the axles, the brakes, all those sort of systems, to see if there's damage. They're going to listen to that, and they're going to say, hey, there's a problem in one of these vital systems. This part needs to get replaced. You can't just pop down to Home Depot and get a new part. Steam locomotives are essentially all custom built. They were built specifically for a job. They didn't go, oh, this seems good, let's get it for this. This would meet our car. They call up a shop and say, hey, these are the exact specs we need, the dimensions, the parts, the materials, all that. These steam locomotives are custom made. That's why you have a massive machine shop to fix those damaged parts. It is much better to fix those parts than have them break while on the railroad. Because if they broke while on the road, they could stop the train from itself moving or possibly derail, which costs the railroad a lot of money and a lot of time. This inspection pit is roughly newer, about the 50s, 1950s, and you can sort of tell that from the deck. The older inspection pits are a lot more shallow. So for this inspection pit, you can kind of crouch walk through it to do that job. The older inspection pits, you had to either kneel or crawl across it, which isn't fun on the knees. Any questions so far? Yes.
Well, we also have another resident in here. Canadian National number 3254.
Correct.
Built in 1917. Last ran in 2012. And behind that, then you got a little inspection car that's usually used for moving things that are not under their own power.
That is correct. So, with all of that said, oh, I guess one little minor clear. Yes, that right behind me, that vehicle. That vehicle is something called a tractor mobile. That itself is what we use to move locomotives so they can't move under their own power. That also is what we use to use cars because they can't move under their own power. That is essentially a diesel tractor that can go on the rail lines. There's a coupler on it. There's a claw coupler. That's what we actually use to move these locomotives. So like when we brought out 2317 out front, we used the tractor mobile. I believe it was the yellow one, which you see inside the shop. So with that said, we have now reached our lovely point of no return. I'm going to reiterate this for anyone that joined us after I said it. This right here, unauthorized personnel, keep out. As long as you're between me and CJ, you're authorized personnel. Congrats on the promotion.
Yep.
Once you walk through this gate, you are stuck with me for 45 minutes. There really isn't a place to sit, drink, or use the bathroom. So if you cannot handle that, please recognize that. Also, if you have some sort of time commitment, please recognize that. Are we all good?
Is it strollers?
Yes, strollers.
I'm scheduled for the excursion. Will this be over by then?
What time are you boarding for the excursion?
It's like 4.
Yes.
Oh, good. Thanks.
This will be over by 3. This will be over by 3.
Oh, good. Thanks. Just checking.
Yes. All right. TJ, you mind just holding this open?
Yeah.
Awesome. Spectacular. All right, folks, right this way. A fun little game I like to play is spot the 3713 parts. It's really easy, they're everywhere. That's all along this bed, our parts for the Boston and Maine 3713. That is our large mainline passenger steam locomotive we're attempting to restore, of which I will point out once we actually get to the end of the story.
Every time that I've been coming to the back shop, I've seen it little by little taking shape.
Well, that's why I call the glacial progress of restoration.
Also, we got a B&O coach back here.
Correct.
I'm not sure if that coach actually has a name.
I don't believe so. Is it raining? Kind of. Okay, because it's raining, I'm gonna do this next part here. It's called drizzling. I don't feel like standing out there.
I actually like filming Steamtown on these drizzly gray days.
I appreciate it.
It lightens the look.
You guys can make up more space. It's fine.
It
Basic this like between. I don't want to squeeze you all. So I like doing a stop here because I like pointing out this space directly to my left. In here, it's kind of a fun problem you got to deal with a roundhouse. How do you get these round sort of non-straight rails into straight bays inside the machine shop? You don't really think about it. But they do that with something called a transfer table. Now, like I said, the railroad loves their simple names. A transfer table works like a turntable, except it doesn't spin, it moves horizontally. So what would have been here is essentially a table that would have been laid into the ground with a horizontal rail. That they would bring the locomotive on, it'd be moved via a motor, that's depending on what you're talking about, it's either moved by man, motor, or animal, or pneumatic, depends on when you're looking. That doesn't exist here anymore. That is because of the 1937 expansion. When this expanded out, there just physically wasn't enough space here for a transfer table to operate. So they ripped it out and they moved it farther back towards the erecting shop. That's where they moved all of their, basically their larger maintenance work, and kept here at the machine shop for the smaller maintenance work. As we're walking out, you can see where the old bay doors were based on where those concrete blocks are. We no longer need those bay doors, so we've been filled in with concrete blocks. Any questions? Awesome. On to the machine shop we go.
Oh, a Lehigh Valley boxcar.
Yes, sir. That belongs to the Anthracite Railroads Heritage Society.
Oh, good.
One of our partner organizations.
Wow. And this is the oldest part of the property, I'm guessing.
The entire property's old. This one is from the mid 1850s.
Wow.
This is one of the original machine shops when this was turned into a railroad site. I please kindly ask you guys stay on the yellow line.
Oh.
Thank you. So, this is our machine shop. When the National Park Service first received this building, it was essentially empty. None of these green machines were here, which is kind of a weird thing to think about now. However, there were a few original machines. Of those remaining, there's one, essentially. Technically, there's two, if you count that little jib crane right there. The main one I like to point out is the overhead crane, directly to my left, if you look up. There used to be 5, now there's 1. Don't ask me where they went. That crane, I believe, was last tested and used in 2005. However, there was a small issue with it. If you notice that yellow box right there is essentially the fuse box. Directly underneath it is the operator's seat. Last time they fired it up, the fuse box arced lightning. So, OSHA deemed that a workplace safety hazard because they're no fun, and we could no longer use it. However, it is now more of a static piece, and ironically, his nickname is now Sparky. So, as I said before, this room was essentially empty, but now you notice it isn't. There's a lot of these machines here. So they want to guess where these machines came from. A nice little hint I like to give is their color.
Wedding shots.
Good guess, but no.
Very simple. Different brand thing, but very simple.
So these are all U.S. military surplus. These are from U.S. U.S. military manufacturing installations and battleships and aircraft carriers. That's why I love the lovely sort of dark, murky green. That's a great thing about being part of the Department of the Interior. Your next door neighbor is Department of Defense, and the largest hoarder in the world is the U.S. military. All these machines are pretty much post-World War II, pre-Korea. Fun fact about post-World War II, pre-Korea, there really isn't computers. There's not a single functioning computer in this entire shop. A lot of it is measure twice, cut once. That's how we work here. That's how they worked here when this was operated by the railroad. You didn't have those fancy-dancy computers. All of our shop guys back here can use these machines. They're all operable. Pretty much all of them are operable. Yeah, ironically, the only ones that aren't operable are the ones that they put computers in, which is, I think, kind of ironic. Now, with that said, I'd like to point out a few of our machines here. Now I'm going to go walk over to the first two, if you would like to follow me. Busy picture, an imaginary line next to this, in front of this recycling can, just stand there.
Question?
What's up?
Do you know what the lifting capacity of that crane is?
15 tons. If you look on the side, you see that 15-5?
Right.
That 15 means the main crane can carry 15, the 5 means the auxiliary the auxiliary crane can carry 5. You'll note there's a bigger one we have back in the other shop that's 30. So, sorry about the space, there's a lot of you. Got them. I like to point out two machines. One over here is our wheel lathe, also known as a horizontal lathe. Here's where you would work on the wheels for our locomotives. You work on the wheels for a lot of for the diesels, and you also work for the wheels and the tires for steam locomotives. Fun fact: steam locomotives have tires. You really don't think about it. The largest tire that this can handle is 80 inches. It's right behind me over here. That is an 80-inch drive wheel tire. Now, why would you ever need a tire that large? Well, for locomotives with 80-inch drive wheels, which we do have one, which I will point out later. What this does is it's used to work out flat spots and do the interior grooves in steam locomotive tires. Now, what is a flat spot? A flat spot is when you have to put, let's say hypothetically, you have to throw your train into emergency. You have to go down steep grades, or you have a really brake-happy engineer. Flat spots occur on your wheel. When you throw a brake, that wheel stops moving. The train doesn't care that you want to stop moving, it keeps going. As it keeps going and the wheel stops turning, it starts grinding. That grinding away of material from that train still moving results in a flat spot in the wheel. Now, how do we solve that? You shave the material. So, here's some examples of that shaved material. This right here was either a very bad flat spot or a very bad machinist. They won't tell me which. This right here is a smaller flat spot, more typical, but still, weirdly, a lot of material to shave off for a flat spot. You want to shave off as little material as possible for two reasons. One, material is money. The railroad didn't like that, and we don't like spending extra money than we need to. Secondly, you only shave off 2 inches of material from a wheel before it has to be completely replaced. It's more expensive to replace a wheel than to shave it down. Blame the FRA for that. The second thing I like to point out over here is our wheel press. This physically presses the wheels onto the axles. If you can see right here, this right here extrudes a force of 300 tons to put that wheel onto that axle. The majority of the machine is actually underground, as you see from these plates right here. We don't very often run this machine. Last time we did, it shook the ground so much we received multiple phone calls to see if there was an explosion. There wasn't, this was just running. That kind of shows the scale of our toys here at Steamtown. Now, do you mind coming down here? I'm going to switch over there for you. We're going to start walking this way. So, a lot of people sort of forget as they switch into diesel. Part of that is maintaining historical accuracy. Now, currently we fill a tender of our steam locomotives with a fire hose. Not very historically accurate. But they would have used something called a water column, which is currently being pointed out by that dad right there with the camera. That is the that is the water column. These are the actual blueprints from our archives for a water column that was on site. This water column was scrapped when this railroad switched over to diesel. Some of the original parts for that water column are still here, directly to my left, your right. These are original pieces.
Do we have anybody who's on the patrols right now?
These are the original components for that water column. You have sections, and this is from our scrapyard. The plan is to get these up to working capability. Machine any parts we don't have, and any parts that we can't machine because it needs to be casted. We order that out. The plan is to get this set up, run a water hose through it, and use it to fill up the tender.
That's going to be good.
It's going to be very interesting to watch and very fun to maintain.
And
that's our job.
Hopefully, you guys maybe will get a coal tower going.
We'll see. So, I'm going to move on to one of the last machines I like to point out. Well, one of the last pretty obvious machines. picture an invisible line like here, just to make space.
777 to 404.
This right here is our King machine. This is a dual bore vertical lathe. Now, as you can kind of tell by the name, dual bore. There's two different places where the knives go. It is vertical, and it's a lathe because the base of it spins. This right here is still used. This right here, from what I was told by one of our shop guys, is from the USS Scranton. It's really ironic to think that it's back home. This here is used for a lot of our parts. It's being used for a bracket currently. It is usable to mill the outside and the inside of a part at either the same time or at different times. You can choose not to use one blade. These are used for the larger parts that our other lathes can't handle. This right here does not fit on a flatbed. So a great question, how to get from the USS Scranton to here? And the answer to that is pieces. This came to us like a 20,000 piece jigsaw puzzle that spins. Not very fun. However, we were a bit lucky. At the time, a lot of the employees here and a lot of our volunteers were former military. They worked on installations that used this machine. So they actually helped us put it back together and taught us how to operate it. It does still run, and it's very interesting to see.
And loud.
They're very. Yeah, be mindful, this is an active shop. So, as we go down this way, you can see more of the actual active restoration projects.
And I will always be sure to watch out for any sort of moving little vehicles like that truck there. Watch out for any moving vehicles.
I would like you guys to picture an imaginary line next to that trash can. This is the next part where I like to give a little bit. Try to move it a little bit left.
Okay.
Like, picture an imaginary line just here.
Yep.
Just so I have a large group, so. If any of y'all have ever worked in a shop or just worked in, like been to wood shop in school, these are just bigger those, and because it's bigger parts they're making.
Nice feeling wood shop.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can try again here, see how it goes. So, why do I like to stop here? Because I like to point out this. This right here is the original piston head for the Baldwin 26 when we received it as a National Park Service. Now, a really great question is, why is it here and not in the Baldwin 26? Well, it broke. Then why did it break? So, in the early 2000s, they noticed a bit of an issue with the Baldwin 26. It wasn't running right. So, as we said before, they brought it into the roundhouse. They noticed there was a problem, brought it back here for further diagnostics. They realized there was a problem. How pistons are meant to move is you have that flat body and it moves forward and back. Very little friction. What does grind is something called a piston ring, which is along these sides. That is what's meant to wear down. There was an issue though. It wasn't laying flat, it was slightly angled. So the top of it was scraping its housing. That's a problem. With that, you have to replace the piston head and the actual housing itself because the damage is being caused to it. It's not going to run perfectly. So, as a National Park Service, we go into a crossroads. Do we fix this or make a new one? Our job is preservation, so we said, let's fix it. So we did. Essentially what happened is they layered solder onto the part that was worn down. Picture like frosting a cake. Layer cool, layer cool, layer cool, then they shave it down flush to the size they needed. And it worked. This could, in theory, go back in the Baldwin 26. However, the issue is we don't know how long it would work. Our guess, optimal, would have been about 10 years. It could have been 5. We don't know. We can only run it to find out. Because of that, we decided to make a new one, because that new piston's going to last about 75 years. At least that's our guesstimation. You see a bit of the difference. So what we did, we called a local foundry. We said, hey, we need a piston head. They said, okay. They sent one over. It was the wrong size. We sent it back. They sent another one over. It was the wrong size. We sent it back. The third one they sent, it was within a margin of error. We were able to shave it down and actually use it as the piston head in the Baldwin 26. Now, why do I reference this? Because I believe Steamtown is a very unique problem that most other parks don't, is that our attractions are actively trying to die. They are 100-year-old machines. They're not designed to run this long. We are Frankensteining them together to keep them running. So you run into a problem that, if you know philosophy, is called the Theseus' ship problem. So if those of you that don't know what Theseus' ship's problem is, imagine you have the ship that Theseus sailed. They put it in a museum. Slowly over time, those boards rot. Those boards need to get replaced. Over time, every single board has been replaced. Now, none of those boards Theseus ever stepped on is that still the original ship. Now, at Steamtown, we face that same issue. We replaced every part in the 26. Is that still the original artifact that the National Park site received? And I say yes, and why is that? Because we use similar material, machines, and methods as if it would have been running anyway. The machine that we got is not the original. Parts have been replaced, parts have been fixed. It ran. It was a business tool. It was a machine. They didn't care about historic authenticity. They got new parts when they broke. And that's what we do here. And because we're using the same methods, it is still the same artifact. It's as if it had just still been running. I like to cover this part because they don't let me cover philosophy in most of this, and I have a fun time with it. So, with that said, you're now going to see actually one of the locomotives that is currently under restoration. It's right here, this lovely diesel engine. This engine is not ours. This belongs to one of our partner organizations, our lovely Anti Railroads Historical Society, which you can see right over there, that little sign. So, why do we have an engine? If you guys want to move up, feel free. I got space. We got a larger group that I'm normally used to. The side panels aren't missing for weight or because it looks cool. The side panels were scrapped before this was collected by our partner organization. Now, if we don't own it, why is it here? Because us and our partner organization have the same goals. We want to see cool old trains run. So why are we going to get in each other's way? All we really offer them is a spot to actually park the locomotive. They bring their own labor. They pretty much bring all their own labor, tool, and materials. We also provide them a location to actually run this once it starts running. The plan is to get this up to running order. As you can see, they're actually getting a lot of work done cosmetically. I believe a good amount of the interior work is done.
What railroad did this came off of?
Give me a second. Louisiana,
Oh,
I think. One of the L states. Oh no. It's Louisiana or Illinois. The sound's very similar in my brain. I can't remember which.
oh wow.
No, I believe it was Illinois. Sorry.
Oh, so this, and judging by the orange, I'm guessing this came off of the Illinois Central.
Well, they aren't painting it the correct colors. They're painting it Lackawanna colors.
Well,
That's what because it's going to be running here, and that was the major railroad running here. They're painting it DL colors. Fun fact about this one is that the governor inside its actual engine is the same governor, the B-29, because they were built by the same company around the same time. General Electric didn't want to make a new governor. It said, we'll shove the plain one in here, and it works. The plan is to get this up and running, which I think is very cool. So, if you follow me down here, I'm going to show you another really cool structure. If you guys got enough space, if you need to go outside, just let me know. If you look down there in that massive building, that building is the old erecting shop. That building is not owned by us. Darn it. That building's not even owned by the Department of the Interior. That building is owned by the U.S. Department of Defense. It looks like a 5-6 story building. It's actually one massive room. In there would have been massive overhead cranes that could lift 300 tons or do undercarriage work for large locomotives. It is still a functioning building. It is actually operated by General Dynamics and is an artillery shell manufacturing plant. I like to point it out. I think it's really cool. I also lovingly call it the most secure building in all of Scranton. So sorry for those of you in the back. If you want to just take a moment to look out there, feel free.
ooh.
These are a few more. But we'll get to those later.
Oh man, a little air conditioner in here.
It's actually a humidifier.
Huh. Because it can get pretty stuffy in here.
Exactly. And we're not going towards the steam engine. Not your baby yet.
I know. It smells like my basement in here.
Oh yeah, if anyone wants to take photos, feel free. We're not the DOD. Alrighty. So, I know you guys are here at Steamtown, however, I'm going to talk about diesel again. I'm sorry. So, a great question I like to ask people is why did we switch away from steam into diesel? And there's a few different answers to that. Typically, you saw it between the 1930s into the 50s. Is where you saw a lot of that shift away. Prior to the 1930s, diesel technology wasn't great. However, a fun little thing happened called World War II that allowed for the manufacturing plants here and companies to get really good at making diesels. So they eventually became much better than steam in a few different categories. One, diesel used something called standard. Oh, I'll stand over here so more people can hear me. Diesel used something called standardized parts. Picture like Home Depot. You can go and get a part, use it interchangeably. That's what diesels had. So instead of having a large machinist crew, you just had a warehouse on site with a bunch of replacement parts that can be sent in. You no longer had to deal with paying with them, deal with those unions. Secondly, they had more operating time on the actual lines. Steam locomotives spend about 60% of their lifetime actually just under maintenance, not making money. Diesels spend about 20% of their lifetime just sitting in maintenance, not making money. Big difference. Instead of spending 40% making money, you're spending 80. That's double. Third, it was much easier to use logistically. Here, all you got to worry about is there a diesel tank on site? How far can my diesel tank take me? Is there a diesel tank where I'm going? For steam, you deal with water, coal, the quality of your coal, the quality of your water, who's operating it, all of that. Different areas along the line to actually fill at different rates. With diesel, you didn't have to deal with that. So diesel made more money, was cheaper to maintain, it was easier logistically. That's typically why you see the shift away from steam into diesel. Now, with that said, I'm going to bring you over so you can see see our diesel drop pit. Then when I'm done with diesel, huzzah, then we're moving to steam.
Well, there's a diesel that's under restoration.
Yes, sir.
Locomotive.
Western 105, 44 tons Swiss rim.
Wow. Actually, I saw one of those on display at a museum in Port Jervis, New York.
So, this is where I do my little diesel talk to tell you how diesels work. So, you see, essentially the engine block. That's something called a prime mover. That's where everything is housed and where everything goes through. On top of those little like poster shapes, that's where something called the power assembly would go. Each one of those power assemblies, picture them as an individual car engine. That's where the pistons and the housings are. Those power assemblies are on those pallets right there. Those are the power assemblies. Those power assemblies get aerosolized diesel, then the pistons compress that diesel. The compression causes the diesel to combust. That combustion expands the gas and moves the piston. That movement rotates a crankshaft. That crankshaft essentially goes into a large alternator, which is sort of that rusted cylinder shape right there. That generates an electric current. Fun fact, diesels are the world's first hybrids. The electric current that goes into something called a traction motor. That traction motor converts that electrical current into rotational energy, and that's what makes the diesel move. Our traction motors are right behind those pallets. I'll point it out on the way back. So, that is my brief explanation of how diesels work. I could be a little wrong, and we'll see. Here, right here is the drop pit. This is specifically, I believe, a General Motors, I want to say, drop pit. That's because when this shop was being expanded, General Motors said, hey, we'll install a drop pit, but specifically for our engines. So they installed this. When that table drops, the top level of the diesels, if they're General Motors, line up flush. Other ones are either slightly above or slightly below, if you notice that railing along diesels. The point of this is to get the weight of the locomotive off the wheel, so you can do undercarriage work or just like flat replacement of the traction motors. That's what's happening right now with this right here. They're doing undercarriage work, hence why it's on the drop table. Prior to this, it was one of the trolleys of the trolley museums that they were changing out the bottom traction motors for. It's about a 35, 40 foot drop. If you want to take photos, feel free. If you drop your phone, I'm not getting it. Steel wheels, fire. They didn't just do it because it's fun. It's because metal reacts with heat. When metal is heated, it expands. These wheels are slightly smaller, these tires are slightly smaller than the wheels they go on. That is because when they heat them, they expand. They can pop them off with a mallet. You get a new tire on, you heat it, you pop it on, and then it cools. It constricts trying to get back to that size, but it can't because there's a wheel in the way. And that friction is what holds tires onto wheels. These wheels right here are brackets because when this moves, it moves fast enough that just the friction of it moving generates enough heat to cause this wheel to slightly expand. In order to stop it from popping off when the train's going, which would be fun, they installed these brackets that are just bolted into the actual wheel in order to stop this from just flying off. So, with that said, any questions? Awesome tackling. This is also where I like to offer a photo shoot opportunity. If anyone is interested, a group at a time, they come up and take photos. Between these sort of blocks here, these guards, please do not stand on the ramp.
The Constitution. Named by James Strawman Moore.
James Schumann Moore.
Oh, good. Eastern Junior High School, Lynn, Massachusetts. Yeah. Part of my family is actually from that part of Massachusetts, so this would have been, well,
So,
my line.
now with the majority of everyone here, I'll start my spiel. You guys can walk off the yellow line, it's fine, as long as you're between these guards here. So, this right here is the 3713 Boston and Maine. Lovely named the Constitution by James Schumann Moore. Lovely called Connie by our back of house staff. So, Connie is a very long, complicated story. It's a very perilous journey. So, Connie, right here, is a Super Pacific. Now, what does that mean? It means she has a Pacific type wheel alignment, which means she has 4 guide wheels to stop her from falling off the tracks, 6 drive wheels in order to get her up to that speed, those 6 drive wheels you saw before, and 2 trailing wheels underneath the firebox to handle that weight. Also called Super because she had all the bells and whistles, metaphorically and physically. She was superheated, which means they superheated the steam. If you know, remember that flatbed out before? Those had the superheater tubes on them. It was essentially, basically picture a tuning fork. Those long tubes took steam from the steam dome after water had been converted into steam, grabs that steam, runs it back through the boiler. It superheats it. It removes more moisture from that steam. When you remove moisture from that steam and add heat to it, it wants to expand, but it's in the same space. If you expand in the same space, it increases in pressure. Physics. So, she was created in 1934. If any of you know about the American history, the 1930s was not the best time. That's the U.S. Great Depression. That is why the railroad company opened up like an essay writing competition or to name locomotives. It's actually very rare to see American name locomotives. It's more of a British thing or a European thing. James Schumann Moore ended up winning for one of these competitions. What also ended up winning was East Salem Witch and Camel's Hump, which are a few more of the 37 series. James Schumann Moore wrote about 2 sentences in his essay. It was essentially, the Constitution is the backbone of America, and American railroads are the backbone of the country. Thus, she should be named the Constitution. And now she's here. Her big claim to fame was troop transport during World War II, moving troops from the Northeast down the eastern seaboard to be shipped out to the European theater. Eventually, she was replaced with a diesel. We don't really care about mainline steam passenger anymore, so she got converted to a stationary boiler for a rail yard up in New England to stop the switches from freezing in the winter. That was no longer necessary. She was going to get scrapped. However, a local business, this is when her life was saved a second time. A local business said their boiler broke. Picture like an apartment complex. They have a bunch of radiators. They need a boiler. They went, hey, do you have one we can rent? They said, sure. She was shipped out to be a stationary boiler for that business. Eventually, they fixed theirs. She was going to be sent back to be scrapped. However, Connie was saved for the 3rd time in her life by a man named F. Nelson Blount. F. Nelson Blount was a seafood multimillionaire from New England. His company is still around and operates in Rhode Island. Blount Seafoods, if you're interested. He went, you have a Super Pacific and you're a scrapper. I'll buy her off you from scrap value. They said sure. And that's how she ended up in his collection. His collection eventually became our collection. And that's why she's here now. The dream is to get her up and running. This restoration work started in about 2001. This restoration work is about as old as I am.
Wow.
Weird
and
thought
me.
to have. A few rangers like to give a few different numbers. I don't like it when they give their numbers because they're a bit too optimistic in my opinion. I give 2 numbers. One for a tender being done and one for the engine being done. Good news, tender is almost done. What you see behind you is the tender frame. That big black piece. Next to it is the wheels that are under that tender frame. That wheels currently being installed is the brake rigging. That's what all those sort of miscellaneous green parts are. Once that brake rigging is installed, the wheels are going to be put on, and the tender frame is going to be flipped. It's going to be flipped onto those wheels. It's currently upside down. Then her tender, which is finished out back, will be put on top. That's the tender essentially done. So the tender, almost there. Good job. The engine itself, about 45% done. So a little under half. We'll get there eventually. Well, we're in a stage I like to call the jigsaw phase. As in, basically the pieces are made, it's got to be put together. Hence why you see all those miscellaneous parts. It's got to be put on. This right here, this cab, wasn't actually made by us. This was made by a local trade school. We love using 3713 as a sort of community point. We needed a cab, they needed a final project, they made us a cab. And that's what's going to end up being put on because her cab was rusted beyond repair. That's why 3713 is important. It's not just that it's cool, it's not just that it's old, it's a piece of history that we are trying to maintain and get running again that we can also use to interact and meet with our local community. And that is why one of the reasons I love 3713. So you guys want to come up, take photos, look at the original blueprints for her, feel free. Have any other questions, feel free to ask.
And of course, for a long time, Steamtown didn't have any like mainline steam engine to helm its Moscow trip. Once this is up and running, Steam will return to that line once again.
Once this is running, it plans to go with the Delaware Watergate.
Yep.